The Electoral College may have voted, but that doesn't mean the fight for the White House is over. Oh, not by a long shot. One report alleges voting machines were designed with inherent errors. Welcome to Chris Chappell. I'm America Uncovered. Or something like that. It's been a crazy few weeks, and I'm just trying to keep up, okay? One thing that's happened is Attorney General William Barr suddenly resigned. And that's unusual, to say the least, because it was just 37 days before the end of President Trump's term. Barr's resignation could mean Trump will have a more cooperative Justice Department, at least for the next month. But even though the Electoral College has voted, Trump isn't giving up on the election. And the lawsuits are still going on in key battleground states. So let's begin in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Supreme Court backed Republicans in a case over voter ID. Under Wisconsin's election law, a voter may declare him or herself indefinitely confined because of age, physical illness, or infirmity in order to get a mail-in ballot. However, back in March, Dane County Clerk Scott McDonald told people who can't present a valid voter ID to say they are indefinitely confined because of the coronavirus. He said, "I urge all voters who request a ballot and have trouble presenting a valid ID to indicate that they are indefinitely confined." He was sued by Wisconsin Republicans, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled in their favor. The ruling said, a county clerk may not declare that any elector is indefinitely confined due to a pandemic. The court also ruled that Wisconsin's lockdown order did not mean all Wisconsin voters were indefinitely confined. The court also said anyone who submitted a vote claiming they were indefinitely confined when they aren't, and remember, a pandemic is not a reason to claim that, their ballots would not count. So that was definitely a win for Wisconsin Republicans. About 215,000 voters claimed indefinite confinement status this fall, nearly a four-fold increase from the last presidential election. It's impossible to say, however, how many of those claims were invalid without looking into each case. The state Supreme Court also delivered a defeat to the Trump campaign, throwing out a lawsuit it described as unreasonable in the extreme. Well, putting it that way probably would give you the wrong idea. Imagine that, a headline being misleading. The Trump campaign sued to invalidate some ballots, including all of the indefinitely confined ones in two heavily Democratic counties. The court ruled that the argument to throw out the indefinitely confined ballots lacked merit, while the other three arguments were raised way too late. Specifically, the court ruled that the campaign's delay in raising these issues was unreasonable in the extreme, and the resulting prejudice to the election officials, other candidates, voters of the affected counties, and to voters statewide is obvious and immense. In other words, they were saying the lawsuit should have been brought much earlier. The delay was unreasonable in the extreme, not the content of the lawsuit. The Wisconsin Election Commission is also divided on election fraud. A Republican member of the Wisconsin Elections Commission, Dean Knudsen, said there is no evidence of any fraud related to Dominion voting machines in Wisconsin. But another Republican member, Bob Spindell, said it appears we certainly had fraud all over the country in this 2020 election. Which is to say, facts are just people's opinions now. And in other Wisconsin election news, because yes, there's more, GOP lawmakers are refusing to reimburse $3 million in Dane and Milwaukee counties for recount costs. According to this letter by the Dane County Board Chair, GOP lawmakers are withholding funds for a recount in Dane County. The letter doesn't elaborate on who on the 16-member committee objected or why. It might be because the recount that Trump wanted ended up confirming Biden's win over Trump. Of course, the recount itself may have been accurate, but the votes cast were fraudulent. We don't know. But we do know that the Trump campaign had paid $3 million for the recount. And now, GOP lawmakers are refusing to use that money to actually make the reimbursement. According to Milwaukee County Clerk George Christensen, the lawmakers are playing politics with money that isn't theirs. It's acting in bad faith. It's not their money, it's Trump's money. And this is what he decided to spend it on. Well, that's not all he spends his money on. I'm loving it. And now to Michigan, where there are some very weird problems with electronic vote counting. Right after the short break. Welcome back. What's happening in Michigan? Data firm Allied Security Operations Group carried out a forensic audit of 22 Dominion voting systems in Antrim, a small Michigan county. The report said, "We conclude that the Dominion voting system is intentionally and purposefully designed with inherent errors to create systemic fraud and influence election results. The system intentionally generates an enormously high number of ballot errors. The electronic ballots are then transferred for adjudication. The intentional errors lead to bulk adjudication of ballots with no oversight, no transparency, and no audit trail. This leads to voter or election fraud." Antrim County had issues with Dominion voting systems. This is from back in early November.
In Michigan, it was partially to blame for the 6,000 miscounted votes in Michigan's Antrim County. A skewed result initially saw Biden as winning the traditionally red county, but when corrected, they found out Trump actually won. The Antrim County Clerk, Cheryl Guy, initially attributed the problem to a combination of a software glitch and human error. But just today, county officials backpedaled on the statement, saying the Dominion software had no part in the mistake, now blaming the problem solely on human error.
However, the new report rules out human error. The statement attributing these issues to human error is not consistent with the forensic evaluation, which points more correctly to systemic machine and/or software errors. The systemic errors are intentionally designed to create errors in order to push a high volume of ballots to bulk adjudication. Guess who's unhappy with the report? Michigan election officials, the ones whose jobs are on the line. Michigan Elections Director Jonathan Brader said that the report makes a series of unsupported conclusions, ascribes motives of fraud and obfuscation to processes that are easily explained as routine election procedures or error corrections, and suggests without explanation that elements of election software not used in Michigan are somehow responsible for tabulation or reporting errors that are either non-existent or easily explained. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and State Attorney General Dana Nessel, in a joint statement, called the report another in a long stream of misguided, vague, and dubious assertions designed to erode public confidence in the November presidential election. Benson also tried to get election machines wiped, despite an ongoing audit blocking it. Which is funny, because the audit of Dominion equipment found the computer system shows vote adjudication logs for prior years, but all adjudication log entries for the 2020 election cycle are missing. Gosh, how strange that only this year's log entries would go missing. But the Dominion CEO testified this week in front of the state legislature, where he denied everything. I guess that settles it then. But there's more coming up after the break. Welcome back. Unless YouTube demonetizes this episode. Now, let's look at Pennsylvania. After the Supreme Court shot down a Republican challenge to the vote, Republicans are asking the court to take a look again. They had requested the Supreme Court block the certification of votes in Pennsylvania. The court gave no reason why it rejected it. On to Georgia. Ahead of Monday's Electoral College vote, the state Supreme Court rejected another Trump lawsuit. The lawsuit alleges tens of thousands of people voted illegally in the state. But the court didn't look at the evidence. Instead, the court said it lacks the jurisdiction to consider the petition and rejects it. Meanwhile, attorney Lin Wood has sent his lawsuit up to the U.S. Supreme Court. That was after the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit upheld a decision to dismiss his case because there was no evidence. I'm kidding. They dismissed it without reviewing the evidence. because they said the plaintiffs lacked the legal standing to even bring the case. Lin Wood says an agreement between Georgia election officials and the state's Democratic Party that changed the process of handling absentee ballots in Georgia is unconstitutional. He says those decisions should have been made by the state legislature. That's a similar argument made by the state of Texas in its lawsuit, which the Supreme Court also rejected. Now to Nevada. According to a sworn affidavit, Nevada DMV records suggest that nearly 4,000 legal and illegal aliens cast votes in the 2020 general election. In Nevada, thanks to legislation enacted by the state's Democrats, the DMV automatically registers to vote every person who obtains a driver's license. And in Nevada, both legal and illegal non-citizens can obtain driver's licenses and identification cards. One expert submitted an affidavit where he matched up non-citizen data with voter data. Among those non-citizens, more than 6,000 were registered voters, and nearly 4,000 of them actually did vote in this election. That is illegal. Only citizens are allowed to vote in federal elections, not aliens. I love you, Alf, but you can't vote. Now on to New Mexico. Yes, New Mexico. This is the newest state to see election-related lawsuits. The Trump campaign on Monday filed a lawsuit over the state's use of ballot drop boxes. The complaint asks the court to order a delay in certifying New Mexico's electoral vote, which took place on Monday, and mandate a statewide canvass of New Mexico's absentee ballots, including investigations into every voting location where a drop box was implemented. And finally, Arizona. Arizona Republicans announced on Twitter they would be appealing their lawsuit to the Supreme Court.
If we are accepted, we'll be only the third case in this presidential in 2020 to be accepted by the Supreme Court.
So it doesn't sound like great odds.
The judge set unrealistic deadlines. Well, that only gave us 3 days to examine up to 3 million ballots, which we all know is impossible.
That also doesn't sound like great odds. So among these lawsuits brought in various states, none of them seems to be substantial enough or taken seriously enough by the courts to actually change the outcome of the 2020 election. Meanwhile, Trump's campaign lawyer, Jenna Ellis, told Newsmax that the Trump campaign will keep fighting for these lawsuits even after January 6th. She says that's because it's ultimately about election integrity.
We as Americans have to make sure that this never, ever happens again, and that we make sure to put in place election integrity safeguards that President Trump has been calling for, and that's what we're going to continue to work on. So never give up the fight. We are proud to be Americans. We want to make sure to protect free and fair elections. Every legal vote should be counted. That shouldn't be a controversial position.
Oh, but it is a controversial position. Sounds like 2021 could be just as fun as 2020. And you know, if I've learned anything from 2020, it's that there's still time for an alien invasion to happen before the end of the year. And you know how I've been covering a lot of election fraud-related content lately. Well, I'm doing it because you, the viewers, have told me you want to see more. YouTube, on the other hand, is telling us we should do more episodes about other topics that aren't controversial. They've been demonetizing a lot of our election videos, which is why we need your support on Patreon. For as little as $1 an episode, you can ensure we keep making America Uncovered despite whatever YouTube throws at us. Visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered to learn more. We also have PayPal and Bitcoin. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.